This video is sponsored by Squarespace, the
Emily Scarrett
website builders. Think about it. There's now a generation of die-hard rugby fans who have never seen the Red Roses lose a match. It's now nearing 5 years since Jesse Tremouillier's last-minute try set Grenoble alight and condemned England to their most recent defeat. And yet, after a few fierce battles and one lucky escape thanks to the floodlights blowing out, this weekend's Le 15 du Féminin may just have given Simon Middleton's side their single biggest scare over the ever-growing and infamous 27-game winning streak they're currently on. Because whilst England's resolve and discipline might have closed it out in the end, on Saturday, Thomas Dirac and Annick Hérard's side might have given us the roadmap, the game plan, the exact blueprint for how to beat this England team and end that generation streak without heartbreak. Try being Scottish, guys. Honestly, you don't know how good you've got it. And it was something France did with what I've now come to recognise as one of the greatest, smartest, most innovative defensive performances I have seen in my life, seemingly designed by a cyborg Shaun Edwards sent back in time to prevent Marley Packer from becoming too powerful. I recognise it's hyperbole, but I think it's worth it. So, what did France do on defence to blunt England? Why is it so clever? And how did England break it down enough just to win the game anyway? There are essentially two philosophies on defending in rugby union. One is to treat it as a hunt to get the ball back. You target turnovers, look to attack and isolate the ball carrier at the breakdown, try to force knock-ons and dodgy passes. The other is to defend to contain. Teams that soak up 20-odd phases of tackles, slowly knocking you backwards and getting under the opposition's skin until they eventually make a mistake. Teams who were almost happier to defend than to attack. Warren Gatland teams, in other words. What France gave us this weekend was a kind of bleeding between those two. Obviously, every team wants to get the ball back eventually, but France provided a predetermined, pre-calculated switching between these two approaches, specifically tailored to the English attack and what they knew they were going to do based on 26 games winning streaks worth of evidence on how they'll play. This, 90 minutes into the game, is an ideal example. Earlier this year, England and France met in the final round of the 2022 Six Nations, with both teams going for Grand Slams and a packed out crowd hoping to see a historic win for Les Bleus. And then, England's rolling maul happened. A phenomenal start by the 15 de France faded away as the Red Roses rolled in 3 straight tries from their driving line out. The secret to England's drive is as much the technique taught by forwards coach and former Leicester Tigers maul goblin Lewis Deacon as it is their size. It's mostly just a thing of beauty. They're all packed in tighter than a misophobiac's lunch. And so it feels like France have spent the last 4 months almost psychotically charged, trying to work out ways to prevent that drive, that line out, that maul that cost them 3 scores in what could have been one of the biggest games of their lives. And their answer to that problem was as genius as it was French. The answer? C'est la vie. Most teams confronted with bewitching mauls look to pull this kind of Adam Beard shit, trying to tie players up, wrap the ball up, disrupt it, make it unplayable, eventually win a scrum back to their team. The idea is you want to spoil the opposition's biggest strength, turn it on its head. If their pack is bigger than Beatlemania, it makes sense to just tear it apart from the inside rather than thunder against it. You don't want to try and match fire with fire, you want to try and match fire with like a nice blanket or something, maybe a little bit of water. France tried that in the Six Nations. They didn't try it on Saturday. Instead, they just went, don't be shy, straighten up your tie, get down from the treehouse sitting in the sky, and just copy what England do. France instead boiled in just as tight. This setup for a counter-drive is more like the setup for a scrum than a traditional defensive maul. From experience, they knew they could get parity in that area with England, so why give them the upper hand here when they could set it in the same way? France weren't fussed at all about disrupting England. They only want to slow them enough that the use it call would come from the referee, because once that phrase left her lips, the tact could change. And so we come back to this ideal example. Instead of pushing straight to repel, France looked to wield the maul, meaning England are using their momentum to drive sideways. This was an effective tactic in Rugby Challenge 2 on PS3, so France give it a go in real life. Honestly, this is where all teams would get the tactical advice from. However, this has a secondary effect. Once the ball passes the 15-metre line here, the line-out is officially over, and that means to remain onside, the backs only need to be behind the back foot, no longer 10 metres away as they did before. England's go-to if someone matches their maul is to pull a move like this one against Wales, using the time the 10-metre advantage buys. England no longer have that kind of edge. However, France also smuggle squad captain Gaël Hermé onto the outside of the maul. This was a feature in almost every meat dance England ran all game. One of the French back row would slide onto the edge, meaning the moment England's momentum subsided, this happened. Infante spins it away and the French D is solid. The two centres, who both had outstanding games, they're brilliant. Vernier, one of the best 12 performers of the tournament. And this is a tournament with Ndongu, the Fijian 12. I mean, honestly, she was phenomenal. And here she has eyes on both Scarrett and Harrison, meaning Roland carries herself. But she steps in to make a brilliant contact, ending any momentum Harrison had, whilst Drouin gets her to ground. But if we just rewind a moment, because Hermé is not only on the outside of the maul, but abusing her captaincy privileges to have a chat with the ref and check if the maul is over yet, she breaks off almost 3 whole seconds before a single English forward. Philippon then gives Scarrett a little nudge here, meaning Infante has to step in to clear out, but her competition at this breakdown is a world-class open-side flanker who's just left this maul early, and she blows her right off the ball. Vernier then follows up to secure it, and Aldcroft, the first English woman to the scene, has to act in desperation to try and win it back, and is swiftly penalised. France didn't have to disrupt the maul, because they knew how tight and technical England would set in their drive meant they could just beat them the following phase instead, and secure the turnover there. And this wasn't an isolated example, because France noticed something almost implausibly clever that allowed them to unravel the English breakdown all game long. However, in order to explain this, without wanting to sound like John Inverdale presenting Coast, I am going to need to talk a little bit about England. But first, I should also really quickly talk about John Inverdale, because whilst most people assumed retirement was the reason he didn't present this year's Six Nations, it was actually because he was trying to build a new website. However, being of a certain age, he found the whole world of HTML, coding, designing, all of that, all too stressful and weird. He missed the entire Six Nations, every single game, just because he was trying to get his head around it, just looking at HTML, trying to work out what the slash means. But happily, just as Super Saturday kicked off, he discovered Squarespace. The easiest, simplest, most beautiful way to design a website, all through easy-to-use menus, drag-and-drop tools. John Inverdale suddenly had his site up and running in just a mere matter of hours after months lost to trying other ways. And if you've ever thought, oh, you know what, Lawrence, I'd like to make a website too, but it does seem a bit complicated, then why not head to the link in the description and use the offer code SquidRugby to save yourself some pennies, some money on a lovely new website that is so easy to use. Anyway, sorry, I'm getting off track. Despite their continued and ever eminent success, I don't think anyone who hasn't looked that closely would be particularly surprised to learn that England's shape, their structures, their all-round game plan were actually quite simple. They just execute them at a level of accuracy not seen in rugby since, well, Wayne Smith left the All Blacks. England's whole game is built on momentum, on crashing forward so they can open up everything else. Their backs have a huge range of phase shapes, as they're known, that they can slot into at pretty much a moment's notice, where everybody knows the lines they need to run, but not necessarily where the ball is going, allowing for improvisation within an otherwise quite strict structure. But none of this is ever triggered, none of this is ever used, unless they gain that momentum. To achieve this, they run a pretty standard 1-3-3-1 shape. This just means they chunk their 8 forwards into 4 groups, each one of the corresponding numbers in the 1-3-3-1 pattern. The closest one to the touchline is a sole forward on their own, then next in field is a group of 3, then another group of 3, and then closest to the other touchline, the far touchline, is another one on their own. Alex Matthews is usually one of the edge forwards, as they're known, and then one of the front row usually takes the other spot on the far side, whilst the groups of 3 tend to contain the biggest, ballsiest carriers and support players around them, meaning they're never getting isolated after the carry. And England can always generate quick ball to hit the next pot of 3 and then get a good carry away before they go and see what Zoe Harrison has cooking. The support players also allow them to hit tip-on lines like this, meaning they can pick off any holes that open up as the opposition steel themselves to hit the one big carrying threat. This structure is reasonably straightforward, but allows England to get their biggest carriers into the game to generate fast ball and forward momentum whenever they need it. Virtually any England attack where they don't score off counter-attack or first phase begins in this way. There's a great example right here from the Six Nations. Scarrett takes it in off counter-attack and England instantly set into shape really fast. The first group of 3 carries here goes forward, but only after the second also makes ground does Harrison call it out. England use the edge forward in Cornborough and Scarrett can float around the outside to unleash unleash Kildun, who's brought down around the 22. England then instantly reset to the start of the pattern. Cornborough, the edge forward, clears out, but the first pod of 3 is here. Then the second pod of 3 carries as well. And then England hit Cleel the 1 on her own, but thankfully Abby Ward is working around to set into the next one when they reset the pattern so she can make a brilliant clear out on Lillicrap. During that phase, as the shape fully resets, 3 more form on the right and then 3 more moments later. It's only after running the full pattern twice here that Harrison calls for the ball herself. Enough momentum has been made that enough Welsh defenders have been sucked in so she can throw it over the top to Jess Breach, who scores in the corner. However, where Wales saw a truckload of units charging hard, France saw opportunity. England never play until it's on, and if you can keep them from ever turning it on, you can shut their attack down pretty much entirely. We frequently saw situations like this. France have left a huge hole here, but they gamble on Harrison not calling it out because they haven't yet got that momentum. They haven't yet got going forward through a couple of big carries. But there's more to it. Because England's forwards play is so patterned, it's easy for France to know what's coming if they can just work out where England are in the script. And the easiest way to do that is to let them get to an edge. When England are attacking from midfield, they may yet set in either direction, but when they're attacking from the touchline, they tend to attack from one side right out to the other until they run out of space, at which point they start working back the other way. So France leave this hole here as an invitation. You line up here, and we know exactly what you'll be doing on the next 3 phases at least. All the French had to do was prevent them crossing the game line on those first 2 phases. This is easier said than done, but it's also easier done when the team has a colossal pack and a pretty accurate idea of where the next carry is coming. This 3 is always in the way of the pass to the next one, meaning the French only need to watch one group at a time. They make the tackle and immediately bounce back up to their feet. Mayans makes a brilliant chop on Matthews to catch her behind the game line, and everything for France then just proceeds as they'd hope. Because France haven't contested any of the breakdowns, England's ball has been so fast, these 7 forwards are out the game. They haven't yet got back up to their feet and back into shape. And Harrison's only crash ball option here is Cocaine, the edge forward. And this is exactly what France have been waiting and hoping for. Philippon makes the tackle and Ménager is ready and waiting to latch on. Kildun is the only English woman nearby and, unsurprisingly, can't blow a French woman so big Hagrid probably fancies her off the ball on her own. It's an easy turnover for France. France's essential tactic was to contain for 2 phases, knowing those are the groups of 3, then, assuming England get quick enough ball, attack, look for the turnover on the 3rd phase because England's numbers will be lighter as they'll be forced to use the group of 1 on their own without another forward to clear out. At worst, they're going to be against a back, and they'll back their forwards that'll be in position ready and waiting to take their chance. However, they also knew how important it was that they had to catch those first 2 phases behind the game line in order to open this opportunity at all. Marjorie Mayans was unbelievable on Saturday, and this chop tackle on Sarah Hunter means England are caught behind the game line, and Venier's challenge pulls a 4th English forward in, meaning in order to keep to the 3-player structure, Harrison has to fill in here on Burns' tip line, but knowing that's scarcely worth worrying about, France just ignore it. Sochan and Philippon solely target Byrne and Byrne alone, blowing her backwards, meaning England once again have no momentum and need to use that 1-player pod. Cornborough and McDonald do phenomenally well here, because if we just rewind and pause here, right, it looks like a guaranteed turnover, but the Red Roses do expertly to retain the ball. The entire rugby world is currently caught up in an arms race to generate quicker and quicker ball in order to catch defences off guard and instructed. France flipped that on its head, allowing England to have quick ball, knowing soon enough it would make the attack off guard and unstructured. If they play fast enough, England will run out of numbers, and yet the French defence is physical and disciplined enough that it will just absorb stuff until the moment comes to challenge. This is one of the best first runs of phases England got all game. The first 2 groups both cross the game line, but it's verging on a trap. Those phases take them out to the touchline, and from there, France know exactly what's coming. The pattern resets, and Sarah Hunter's forced so far back she's almost at her first cap. Then Mayans makes another superb chop, and as the England ball slows, they go, just use our sure thing and give it to Marley Packer. That's definitely going to get us going forward. Except nope, no it doesn't. Behind the game line again. Who could have thought it? Even when they couldn't affect the turnover, France could just use what they knew about England to keep them marching backwards, prevent them getting to the try line itself. The Red Roses did start to get wise to elements of this after half time eventually, but only to elements. France get England to an edge here, and as the ball spins to Cornborough, Mayans flies out to smash her, but she can use the tip-on option to send Packer over the game line. However, Cocaine is forced to abandon her position in the free to help clear out here, meaning England are a forward short here, but Ward doesn't adapt, standing too far away from Byrne, so Escudo can turn it over. She drops it before she can send it back. It's unlucky, but the job's basically done. We see the danger. Or here, England spread their free pod out to give Harrison a greater range of bodies to choose from and the defence more to watch, hoping to add some dynamism. And it works, until it leaves Packer isolated and turned over by Philippon. Close enough. England got around the French challenge, but it only resulted in them running out of bodies sooner. Because they knew it was only worth targeting the breakdown every third phase, France had at least 14 players on their feet virtually the entire game, frequently finding themselves in situations where they outnumbered the English attack by 4 or 5 whole players, 4 or 5 whole bodies more. The new boss, Tom Adjarac, is a rare head coach in that his background is in strength and conditioning, not attack or defence. And that really showed in a game plan designed to conserve energy in the most effort-sapping element of the game. It does raise one question, however, and that is just how did England open up France's defence to score their sole try, predictably scored by Emily Scarrett? Well, it's perhaps England's most interesting reply to what France were doing of the game. After France failed to turn over Cornborough, they then meet them really well as they work back through the pattern. The next 2 pods barely make any ground, but then Harrison has an idea. Seeing what just happened, she instead places the 1-player pod, this time Sarah Byrne, on her inside. France gather the ground, but it's more of a tussle, and the following phase, Alex Matthews can make an absolutely brilliant carry against a French defence that was still aligning. Finally, that momentum is moving forward. Cornborough carries again, and at this point, Helen and Roland spot something. This is the job of England's backs, to spot what play is going to work, and she identifies it instantly. Harrison wraps around in order to complete the required shape, as per their usual calls. Rolling with Helen's scheme, Harrison calls for a phase in field to create a better angle, buy them some more time, but gives Roland a little thumbs up to say, it's coming, don't worry. She then gives the same signal to Kildun to call her as a dummy runner, and suddenly everything is in motion. Kildun is running a line. MacDonald and Roland are both screaming for the ball, meaning Vernier has to watch the wide pass, and Harrison drifts across, meaning Escurdo follows. And so, when Scarrett cuts back against the grain, French forwards tied to the ruck, not expecting a backsplay, she can hit Bourdon with momentum and barrel over the line. This is the threat England possess with their double playmaker system and their backs when they're capable of getting that ball going forward, and a sign of what they can do the second that momentum is given. It literally takes one good carry by Alex Matthews to get them going. Roland spots what, and Harrison identifies when. And indeed, it just shows how clinical England really were. It's an interesting one, right? Because the Red Roses got into the French 22 on 13 occasions and scored 13 points, but they only managed to generate proper multi-phase go-forward ball to play off without losing it at the end of their pattern 4 times across the entire game. One resulted in that try. Another, the penalty Emily Scarrett kicked just before the end of the first half. The third, this chance, Hermé doing brilliant work to hold Abby Dow up over the try line, brilliant just rolling it back, great, deliberate turnover, but England do still get over the line. And the fourth allowed them to wind the clock down to 80 minutes in order to kick it off for full time. This becomes a question of what we actually consider an opportunity. Is England being knocked backwards 15 metres out from the try line a more significant try-scoring opportunity than the Black Ferns making metres off 5 carries in a row against Wales in their own half? I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know if there is one, but I do also know that only one of those resulted in a try this weekend. And I also know that the stats do tell us the Red Roses haven't been broken. There's nothing wrong with them. Just somebody worked out a way to stop them before they got started. And here's the thing. Whilst we maybe know what's required to beat them now, I'm less sure if anyone could actually do it. Which is even funnier because we have seen a team try to play this way before. This Six Nations, Wales headed just over the border to Gloucester to take on England, intending to play with tactics that now look like a prototype of what France did. Targeting the head of the carry on the free pods, knowing they were coming and looking to match them for physicality and outdo them for nickel. They only managed to keep this up for about 20 minutes. I'd imagine that would be the case with most teams in this competition. They could probably carry out these tactics, but their likely quarterfinal opponents, Wales, Australia or the USA, could probably only manage them for about 20 to 40 minutes. Canada could probably do it for about an hour. South Africa next weekend might even be able to do it for a while as well, if their performance by France is anything to go by. However, of the teams with the all-round game to properly go out and beat England, the Black Ferns showed this weekend that defending mauls is not their strong suit, and the scrum could be a bit of a problem area. Could be, maybe they're just afraid of Donna Rose. I wouldn't blame them. If they're being blown back by Wales, can the Black Ferns provide the level of physicality required to prevent England pulverising them before they can get the likes of Ruby Tui into the game? And even if they could manage it on occasion, would that be enough to actually beat the Red Roses? Because, France can execute this game plan, but they still didn't win. Admittedly, this wasn't helped by Caroline Drouin having another stunningly French game. 4 kicks out on the full, countered by 1 cross kick, placed so perfectly, so beautifully, at least just so the bounce sits up for the player running forwards. It lands in between players so no one can take it on the full. It means England can't really cover it properly. It's an absolutely just gorgeous bounce. It's perfect. It's a phenomenal try, just coming from a moment of individual skill by a player who put the ball out 4 times on the full in the same game. She's so French. Nor was it aided by the 2 injuries to star players earlier on, even if they did have top quality replacements to enter the fray when they went off. And there's also the bigger hypotheticals. Would England turn down so many points from penalties if they met again in the World Cup final, especially now knowing their maul is only a weapon against 10 of the other 11 teams in this tournament? This game posed so many questions in a tournament where we all entered feeling like we knew the ultimate answer already. And now we head towards the knockouts, with the big question rebirthed in our minds as a possibility. What if after a generation somebody finally beats the Red Roses? Now that's something worth thinking about. Thank you for watching that. That was a very long time talking just about defence. Probably the deepest I've ever done on a defence here on the channel. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you liked it. There is more to come from the World Cup that is currently going on. I unfortunately am not going to get for anything from the second round, which is a real shame. I wanted to get through more, but just time constraints are the problem. But I will move on. The third round obviously coming up, and then the knockouts, which is hugely exciting, and more rugby. So much rugby. Thank you for rugby, and I will see you soon for more rugby.